When it comes to finding areas in creek bottom setups on Onyx from at home, some of the things that I'm looking for, I'm focusing primarily on rut hunting locations, and I'm doing that because I'm trying to find cruising bucks. I'm trying to find where they're funneling down through. They need the water to be able to survive. With the doe bedding in different areas, this is just a very good way for them to travel between doe bedding areas and check it out. With the incredibly low deer densities that we have in a lot of the big woods mountainous region, these bucks are willing to travel quite a ways to find their next doe. So on Onyx, I'll turn the hybrid layer on. If I'm going from a topographical view to the hybrid layer, I'm using that to search for areas with a couple or more valleys that are running into a small stream or creek. And I'm looking for these valleys because they provide travel from the tops of the hills as well as other drainages. And if you think about how you hunt ridges, you look for saddles for travel corridors. Well, those saddles lead down to valleys and creek bottoms below. So it's just an extension of where they would be at on the tops of the hills. So at the base of these valleys, you'll sometimes find beaver ponds, grassy openings, and creek crossings. I'm marking these locations. I want to go in, I want to check these out. I'll show you an example of a creek bottom spot that catches my eye. So as I'm scrolling in, we have, with the hybrid layer on, we have a draw or valley that's running down this way. We have the creek bottom that's coming this way. And on the tops of each of these hills, we have some logging cuts. You can almost assume that there's going to be some doe bedding on the edges of these cuts or down over the side hill. So as you see these through these different areas, there's most likely going to be trails that are running down along these valleys towards the bottom, coming up through another side. As we zoom in here, you can see it looks like there's a beaver pond right here, maybe a smaller one right here. And it looks like this might be a pretty good area for there to be a creek crossing. I don't know that for sure, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that. I'm going to mark that as a creek crossing. And go down to the crossing icon on Onyx. Save that area. And now I'm looking at, okay, here where the topographical lines are starting to spread apart, we're starting to get a little bit more of a gradual valley, and this looks like a flat bottom. And if you have a beaver pond here and you have, the bottom of the hill here, you can use the line distance tool to be able to kind of figure that out, okay? That's only 115 feet across there. So we're looking at, what, just under 40 yards across? That can be a pretty good pinch point and a potential area to look at. So what I would want to do here is have a spot where I was set up on the edge of this beaver pond that I could shoot to this potential trail that's coming down through here. I can also have access to this creek crossing here and any bucks that might be traveling there. And I'm sure there's some other trails that are running in different locations. Deer need water to survive, and even more so during the rut. So they're using creek bottoms to be able to run from doe bedding area to doe bedding area to quickly access different areas. With the low deer densities that we have in these areas in the big woods, they need to travel quite a ways to be able to find does and especially does in heat. The types of creek bottoms that I'm focusing on aren't your big river bottoms. I'm talking about smaller feeder streams. Some might only be 4 to 6 feet wide. Others can be up to 10 to 20 foot wide. The reason why I'm focusing on these smaller feeder streams rather than the bigger creek bottoms is, one, just from the standpoint of they funnel them a lot better. They're able to funnel the deer down to a smaller area and more or less looking at the bigger picture from a micro standpoint. In addition to creating, funnels from a smaller area with these smaller streams that are running through the mountains, they also provide creek crossings that are going up, joining valleys, or little bends in the stream that create low spots that are able to, or lower water levels where the deer are crossing, as well as beaver ponds, which definitely create a good funnel. Big body of water that they can't cross at that point. They're either going to cross above or below that, and then on the sides are funneled down to a smaller portion. Every creek bottom setup is different for me. I'm not looking for an area that's super steep, that's coming down to a narrow bottom, because you're going to create swirling winds that are going to be difficult to be able to deal with. A lot of times in the morning, and even so throughout the day, the thermals are going to pull down with that creek. That cold air, cold water is rushing down the mountain right next to that stream, is pulling the air down. And depending on the location, if you're just close enough to that creek, it'll be like that all day. And that really helps for consistency. Even 30 yards outside of that zone along that stream, you could have your typical winds, you could have your typical thermals with the hills, and it's just really important to test out each of these areas that you walk into to kind of figure out how that wind is working. So the way thermals work are in the mornings and the evenings, at night when it's colder weather, that air is rushing down the mountains, down towards that bottom, and then funneling down towards the bigger valley. Once the sun comes up and mid-morning or so and starts heating up the mountainside, it'll start pulling that air up. So if you're familiar with elk hunting or anything in the Rocky Mountains, this is something that comes second nature, but to a lot of us whitetail guys, it's not something that we think about that often unless you're hunting in these big woods, mountainous terrain. With that consistent wind coming down the stream for most of the day, if not all the day, it's one less thing you have to worry about on your mind of, is the wind going to change, or am I going to have to change stands throughout the day? You can set in that tree all day long and wait for that cruising buck to come through at any point in the day and not really worry about what your wind is going to be doing. Feeder streams, small streams that are coming down, when you have a bunch of valleys that come through looking at Onyx, that come and meet to a certain point as it narrows down in that creek bottom, you'll find usually where there's trail crossings, travel routes, and you're going to have community scrapes. One of the main locations that you're going to find scrapes are in those areas. And in the situation that I typically find is you're looking for hemlock trees, pine trees. You find one like the example that we have here with 5 scrapes around the outside of that tree. I'm gonna find a place to set up right there, because with this many scrapes in the area, anywhere from that late October time frame through November, this can be a great place to set up. We're down in the creek bottom now, looking at a setup that I've had a lot of success in over the years. So I've killed a couple different bucks from the same tree, and this is your typical beaver pond setup, or I should say your ideal beaver pond setup. So the way this lays out, as at the beginning of any beaver pond or at the end are normally going to be trail crossings, because in the body of the beaver pond, obviously it's a bigger body of water, the deer aren't going to want to cross it. So this happens to be on the head end of it, so as the stream's flowing into it, there's a little bit of a curve kind of in the creek, and there's 3 or 4 different trail crossings that go around this edge. You'll notice that a lot on the bends of streams where I'm finding trail crossings. In addition to the trails that go across the creek, we have ones that run north to south with the actual meandering stream. The way I'm setting up on this is I'm backed off of the stream almost directly over top of the beaver pond. The beaver pond's only about 15-20 yards behind me, and why I'm doing that is on a cold November day, you got those thermals that are rushing down the creek coming down to you, and as soon as they hit that beaver pond, the water's usually warmer than the air is, so it's pulling up your scent. So if you think about it, it's coming down and then going up. Essentially, that makes you almost invincible as far as with scent control goes for hunting these spots. You can even have deer come on the opposite side of that beaver pond, what would technically be downwind of you, and never smell you because thermal's being taken up from the heat coming off of the pond. Again, with these creek bottom rut spots, that November 5th to 14th, 15th time frame is your most ideal time. So this was the morning of November 8th. I sat here, had a small buck come cruising down through here. I passed him at about 22 yards, and right at noon time frame, I had this big old 5.5-year-old 8-point broken up come through. I grunted him in. He thrashed one of these hemlock trees behind me, came across. I stopped him at 37 yards and was able to put a good shot in. Once again, came from an area that would technically be downwind to me, But because of that beaver pond helping me with the thermals, I was able to stay completely concealed.